let's review in more detail the structures belonging to the skin. Since the epidermis is the most superficial layer, let's begin there. So remember that the epidermis is a stratified squamous epithelium. This tissue is ideal for the epidermis since the top layers of the stratified squamous epithelium are dead. These dead cells are constantly being shed from the surface as they become worn or damaged. New cells will replace them from underneath. It is a special type of stratified squamous epithelium because it produces a tough fibrous protein called keratin. And keratin will help reinforce the epidermal cells after they have died. It helps them to behave as one continuous sheet. In some regions of the body, the epidermis is 4 layers, while in others, we'll see 5 layers. Additionally, there are 4 different cell types that compose those epidermal layers. In the locations on the body where thin skin is present, there are 4 epidermal layers, which are also called epidermal strata. Thin skin is found everywhere except for the palms of the hand and the soles of the feet. The 4 strata, from superficial to deep, are the stratum corneum, the stratum granulosum, the stratum spinosum, and finally the stratum basale. An easy way to remember the first letter of each of these strata is the saying, "Come get sunburned." In the parts of the body that possess thick skin, so that is, the palms of the hand and the soles of the feet possess thick skin, there is a 5th epidermal stratum that's called the stratum lucidum. Here, the 5 strata, from superficial to deep, are the stratum corneum, the stratum lucidum, the stratum granulosum, the stratum spinosum, and the stratum basale. An easy way to remember the first letter of these layers is the saying, "Come, let's get sunburned." So now that we've examined the epidermal strata, we can examine the cell types that exist within those strata. And there are 4 major epidermal cell types. The first is the keratinocyte, and these are the majority of the epidermal cells, and they are called keratinocytes because they produce the keratin fibers that strengthen the epidermis. In addition to producing keratin, they also produce abundant desmosomes, which help lock the epidermis together as a single continuous sheet, even when the cells have been pushed to the superficial surface and they have died. They are also abundant in tight junctions, which helps the epidermis resist water loss from the deeper tissues of the body. In the stratum basale layer, which is located at the most deep part of the epidermis, there are scattered melanocytes, which are branched cells that produce a pigment called melanin. This pigment is then distributed to the keratinocytes. Melanin helps to shield the keratinocytes from sunlight, in particular ultraviolet or UV light that comes from the sun. So here we see the arm-like extensions of the melanocytes, which are reaching out to the nearby keratinocytes, where they will deliver melanin pigment to them. The melanin, which appears as reddish-brown granules in this image, which are highlighted by the arrowheads, tends to cluster above the nucleus of the keratinocytes, like a little umbrella. Sunlight and the UV light that is in sunlight damages DNA within the nucleus of the cell, and so the melanin pigment helps to shield the nucleus from sunlight. We also see some dendritic cells, which are star-shaped cells that function as part of the immune system. They destroy foreign substances or microorganisms that are within the epidermis. You may also see these cells referred to as Langerhans cells. They patrol the epidermis looking for dirt, debris, or bacteria or other pathogens that they will then destroy or break down. And finally, we have tactile cells. As their name implies, they are touch-sensitive cells. You may also see them referred to as Merkel cells. The Merkel cells are spiny-shaped cells, typically found within the stratum basale. Here, they are associated with a sensory neuron that carries the sense of touch that they detect to the brain, and it is the brain that will then interpret and process that sense of touch. So now let's take a look at the processes that are occurring within each layer of the epidermis, and we'll start with the stratum basale. It is a single layer located at the deepest part of the epidermis, and the stratum basale sits right up against the dermis. In the stratum basale, the keratinocytes are undergoing mitosis, that is, new keratinocytes are being produced. As new keratinocytes are produced by mitosis, they will push older keratinocytes towards the surface, that is, superficially. The melanocytes in this layer will deliver melanin pigment to the keratinocytes as they are being pushed upward. We also see tactile or Merkel cells in this layer, which, as we saw, function as touch receptors. So any kind of continuous mechanical forces on the skin, such as a shoe that doesn't fit very well, will accelerate the mitosis of the keratinocytes, and that causes more keratinocytes to be produced in a short amount of time. And this is going to create a thickening of the epidermis in that particular area. These thickened regions are referred to as calluses. The stratum spinosum is the layer that is superficial to the stratum basale. It is mostly keratinocytes, however, there are a few dendritic cells that are located here too. Recall that the dendritic cells will patrol the epidermis and they'll destroy any dirt, debris, bacteria, or any other microorganisms that may have gotten in. The keratinocytes in this layer begin producing a high number of desmosomes, which will join the keratinocytes together as a single sheet. This will help them stay together even after the cells have died. We also see an increase in the number of tight junctions between the keratinocytes, which will seal the space between the cells, and among other things will help reduce water loss through the surface of the skin. Internally, the keratinocytes are accumulating a large amount of keratin precursors in their cytoskeleton. So moving superficially, the stratum granulosum is next. It is approximately 1 to 5 cell layers thick. This layer is named for the small, dark-colored granules that are visible within the cells. There are two types of granules that are present within the cells of this layer. The keratohyalin granules contain a substance that will convert the prekeratin materials in the cytoskeleton into keratin. The lamellar granules contain a glycolipid that is released when the cells die, which helps to create a water-resistant coating. This coating will help reduce water loss through the surface of the skin from the deeper tissues. It is in this layer that the keratinocytes will begin to die. The stratum lucidum is found only in thick skin, so that is skin on the palms of the hand or on the soles of the feet. It is typically between 1 and 3 cell layers thick and consists of dead keratinocytes. This layer is just underneath the stratum corneum and just above or superficial to the stratum granulosum. It appears as a gray or transparent mass because the glycolipids that are released by the dying cells prevent this layer from taking up any dye or stain. The dyes or stains are used to give the cells color so that we can see their structures when we examine them underneath the microscope. However, this layer stains poorly due to the presence of those lipids. The stratum corneum is the most superficial layer of the epidermis. It is a very thick layer, often containing 20 or 30 layers of cells. Recall that in the stratum granulosum, that is where the keratinocytes began to die. And here in the stratum corneum, they form a completely dead sheet that covers the external surface of the skin. The lipids that were released by the dying keratinocytes in the stratum granulosum will help make this layer extremely water resistant.